You know, chipping doesn't have to be that hard. In these next 3 videos, I'm going to share with you some of the real secrets to making chipping easy. People have told me time and time again this has helped them tremendously on their short game, and I can't wait to share it with you. Let's go and get started. Hey guys, welcome back. And in this video, we're going to talk about probably the most common short game question I get, which is what's the difference between chipping and pitching, and what do I need to do differently with those techniques? So the main thing before we get into the technique stuff, which I will go over in some good detail toward the end of this video, let's talk about the strategy for chipping and pitching. And a lot of people think of chipping is around the green, pitching is farther away from the green, and I don't mind that. We can even talk about pitching would be higher up in the air, carrying the ball farther, landing it closer to the hole, and chipping would be getting it on the green as quickly as possible and letting it roll out. We could even think of it that way, but I also like to think of it as a spin. The goal with a pitch or a chip shot, which right here I have about a 30-yard shot away from this green. If I'm going to chip, I do want to get it on the green as quickly as possible, get it rolling as quickly as possible, but I want to keep the spin off of that. And I'm going to keep the spin off this ball by using a lower lofted club. So if I can imagine, as I take loft off this club using maybe a 9-iron, it's going to be less and less backspin that's transferred into the ball. So if I'm using a 9-iron here, I could probably use an 8-iron. Some people will even use as low as a 7-iron when they're chipping. My goal is to get that ball getting on the green, rolling as quickly as possible, and then really rolling out. It's not bad for one of the first chips of the day. The goal there again, take the spin off, get it on the green as quickly as possible, let it roll as far as possible. Now that's a chip. That's the goal with the chip. I think it takes the least amount of technical skill to successful chips. It's really just more about managing the speed. You don't have to get too fancy with the spin and different things when you're doing a chip, and I'll go over that here in a little bit. But now when we're doing a pitch, we have a different goal. This time I'm trying to carry the ball as close to the hole as possible, use the maximum amount of spin that I can get, and then to really get that to stop close to the green. Now that's going to be really handy, and a lot of the best players in the world are phenomenal pitch shot players, create tons of spin on the ball because it gives you a lot of options. Maybe with this shot, I can chip, I can pitch, I could even putt if I really wanted to, if my chipping and pitching was really struggling. But let's imagine there's a bunker in the way that I have to carry and then stop it really quickly. Let's imagine that there's some kind of obstacle where I need to stop it really quickly. That's going to get really difficult to do if I'm trying to bump and run a 7-iron. So with the pitch shot, I have to use a lofted club. Here I have a 60 degree, that's going to get you the most spin. If I use a 56, that's also going to get a lot of spin, but that's really your two options for a pitch, 56 or 60. You could maybe get away with a gap wedge and still create some spin. Another thing to keep in mind here, if I try to pitch this shot today with the dew on the ground, it's going to be really difficult to get much spin on it. So that ball just kind of rolled up the face because it's wet out here. That's going a little bit higher. If I get I'll try to dry off the club and the ball and see if I can get the best quality shot here. But it's really important to realize when there's water on the ground, it's going to be next impossible to get really high spin rates. And what happens is the water gets between the ball and the club face, and the metal on the club face won't grab that ball. So the grooves, more than anything, they actually just get rid of the water and help you to get more spin that way. Or if there's any debris, maybe if you're in the rough, you're not going to get very much spin. Anytime there's anything between the ball and the face, it's going to be very difficult to get that high spin pitch shot. But again here, the overall goal is I'm going to carry that ball as far as possible. I'm going to get it to spin as much as possible. And that's got a ton of spin. I just hit it too hard. But you can see how that one checked up really quickly as it's up there. So that's the overall differences. A chip, get it on the ground as quickly as possible, take off as much spin as possible, and I'm going to do that with a lower lofted club. A pitch, I'm carrying the ball as far as possible, close to the pin. I'm trying to get the absolute maximum amount of spin that I can, and I'm using a higher lofted club to make that happen. Can't really hit a successful high spinning pitch shot, the kind of one hop and stop shot that you hear a lot of pros talk about. If we're using a 7, 8, 9, even a pitching wedge, just not going to get the spin on it. So now that we know the difference of what the goal is, let's talk about what are the details. And this is really where we can get good at this. So with the chip shot first, again, lower lofted club using a 9-iron, I'm going to go ahead and have my feet pretty close together. And really with any of these shots, whether it's a chip or a pitch, I'm not going to have it too far behind my front foot. So if it's my chip shot, you know, maybe call it a club head width behind my front foot, my lead foot. My feet are maybe 2.5 club head widths apart. So I'm making this a narrower stance. That way I feel like I can rotate a little bit easier. I do want to rotate my body, so as I'm coming back and through, the overall motion is very little wrist. I have a little bit of forward shaft lean to take the loft off, and then from there, I'm going to rotate my body back and through. You'll notice my knees start to pivot around as I come into my follow through. With this shot, I'm not going to get a whole lot of wrist set in the backswing. So I'm not going to get a lot of wrist action. I'm not trying to get a lot of speed and zip at the bottom of the swing. I'm actually trying to take that speed away, get the spin off the shot. And as I come on through, I think one of the most important things is I want to keep this nice and flat. As you get into more advanced pitch shot techniques, so not chip but pitch, then you could start to fold up that wrist, but I think that brings in some inconsistency. You got to be really good with your hands, practice a lot to get good at that. What I want to do is make things as easy as possible so they're kind of bulletproof when the pressure gets on. And if I can keep that left wrist nice and flat as I'm doing that and let that pivot around, finish here, then that's going to make things a lot easier. I don't have to get, because of a lower lofted club, I don't have to get a ton of forward shaft lean because it's already got low loft on it. I'm just thinking about letting that club, or the bounce of the club, kind of skip on the turf right where the ball is, and I'm just staying nice and soft with my hands. So it's okay to get a tiny bit of wrist set. I can do this a little bit, but I just don't want to get all kinds of it. I don't need it when I'm just getting this ball to roll. So it's almost a little bit like a putting stroke. The only major difference with a putting stroke versus this is that my knees are going to pivot. In a putting stroke, I'm going to stay really still with my lower body, and I'm going to go like this. My knees aren't going to move. With this chip shot, I'm going to let my knees pivot a little bit, and that's going to allow me to rotate on through. That's going to keep my wrist from breaking down. If my knees don't pivot and I try to swing through, my wrist is going to break down. If my knees pivot, now my body, my hips, my torso, my arms, my hands, everything's working together as a unit, and that's allowing that to stay very nice and connected in there. So if I do those things, it's going to make it very easy to get that clean contact and get the ball rolling, you know, well. So last thing here, I'm going to favor my left side. I'm probably going to have about 60% of my weight on my left side, and I'm going to feel like I keep it there the entire time. In reality, there is a little bit of weight shift, but I don't think that's the feeling that you're going to have when you're out there. You're just going to feel like it's on the left side the entire time. So to recap, feet closer together, weights on the left side, ball is maybe a club head width or so behind my lead foot. If I was to widen my stance, so if my feet are close together, that's a great ball position, because now it's kind of centered over my sternum, and my sternum is just staying over top of the ball the entire time. If I was to have a wider stance like this, that would be too far forward, because now my sternum is back here. I want to keep the middle of my body over the ball and just rotate back and through as I'm hitting the shot. So that's my ball position. Using a low lofted club, a little bit of forward shaft lean is fine. Let those knees pivot, and let's finish with this nice flat left wrist. So let's get that ball to roll as quickly as possible and get it on the green to where just make things easy. So that's the lowest technique shot. So you don't have to have tons of skill and technique to make that happen. All you got to do is just keep things simple, back and through, get that ball on the ground and run. Now with the pitch shot, I need a little bit more skill, because to get that spin, some things have to happen really well. To take spin off, you really don't have to do anything special. You just don't mess anything up, just let it rotate back and through. But to get spin on the shot, I need to have a really good angle on this club face. I need to have a really good bite between the club face and the ball, and I really have to create a lot of speed here at impact, but use a high enough lofted club to where it doesn't go so far. So things are a little bit more advanced, I guess I would say. My rule of thumb is, if you can pitch, I would prefer you pitch. And when I used to do some clinics, when I first started doing clinics, and you'd be in front of 15 or 20 people and you're doing these demonstrations, the last thing you want to do is completely chunk one or lay the sod over it. And as a player, you know, I always like to pitch it because you got a lot more spin on there and it's cooler, it checks up by the hole. But when I got in front of a lot of people, I realized, it's a whole lot easier to chip. You're not going to mess up as many. But if you have the skill to make it happen and you practice a good amount, you can hit that one hop and stop that really good spin shot. So with this one, again, I'm going to use my 60 degree here today. I think you pretty much need to use that or your 56. The difference here is there's a lot of loft on this club. I can take some loft off and it's still going to have plenty of loft on it. When I get that extra forward shaft lean, what that allows me to do is that allows me to release the club a little easier, and that allows me to be a little bit more consistent because now my hands are more in front of the golf ball. I'm also, the difference with a chip and a pitch, I'm going to use about the same stance and setup, but on my backswing, I'm going to go ahead and let those wrists set a little bit. So I'm going to let those wrists cock. As I come down, I have to be really certain that I don't catch a whole lot of ground. I'm going to hit down and through the ball, but I need to hit that ball first contact and be a little slight bit lower on the face. That way it's really clean. There's nothing between the face and the ball. As I come on through, I can still get that flat left wrist as I come around, but I'm really feeling like I'm accelerating. Everything is really accelerating quickly through the ball to get that extra spin and extra grab on it. And I'm going to carry it a lot farther, which is why I'm swinging harder, but I'll let the spin grab it and stop it. So to recap on this pitch shot, same ball position as a chip. You can move it around a little bit, that's okay, forward or back, to fine tune it for yourself. That same overall ball position is fine. I'm going to get a little bit more forward shaft lean at contact because I have this higher lofted club. It's going to allow me to be more consistent. The ball is going to come out a little lower than it would with if I just use the chipping technique with a 60, but it's still going to come out plenty high. So I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to let those wrists hinge a little bit more and then really accelerate on through there. I feel like I'm very aggressive with my knees, getting everything to accelerate, getting that club to come on through, but I'm not breaking down this left wrist. If I break down that left wrist, I'm going to start adding more loft. The ball will go higher, but it won't spin as much when I do that. It'll be more of a flop shot, not a full-on flop, but it'll just be kind of a lofted. This shot is going to be lower with more spin to stop it. So that's the things I'm focusing on. So let me go ahead and try a few here, see if I can get some clean contact even though the ground's a little bit wet. And we'll see if we can get them to bite a little bit more. That one I just need to be a little bit more aggressive with to get the spin on there. We'll see if I can get one setting up to where I don't get any water between the club face and the ball, and we'll be able to get it to grab slightly more. But notice when we landed those first shots, we're probably on the front third of the green, or the front third if we broke it into quadrants from the flag to the front edge. Front third, middle third, back third. I'm going to land these almost to the back third, really aggressive through there, and you're going to notice they're going to spin a decent amount. That was a great one there, all the way to the back third, and then you saw that really checked up a lot. So again, the difference there, setting my wrist a little bit more. I'm much more aggressive. I'm really trying to come down and be aggressive through that ball, generate a lot of speed. I'm letting the loft on the club get the spin for me, even though I'm de-lofting it. That forward shaft lean allows you to get that perfect angle with your club face to get the spin, plus it gives you more consistency because now my hands are leading and they're in front. And then lastly, I'm going to make sure that everything as it comes around, that still stays nice and flat. That way I can be consistent. So hopefully that helped out a lot and you guys got tons of good information from that. Best of luck, work on those chips and those pitches. I'll see y'all soon. Ugh, that makes you so frustrated. You just want to snap all your clubs in two. Do you feel like when you get over that important chip shot, maybe late in the round, to win a hole, win a match, or just to play a really good round, put up a good score, you start to chunk them, you start to thin them, the hands get really tight, everything gets jittery and shaky and quick. When you really want to be smooth and confident over the ball, it just doesn't seem like that's possible. Well, there's actually some really common instruction, and if you follow this, it works really good, but only for a certain type of chip. I'm going to talk about what type of chip that is, when you can use that type of shot, and how if you try to apply that same technique to all your chips and pitches, it can really destroy your confidence in your game. You get really handsy and you get really jittery over it when those shots matter the most. By the end of this video, if you follow these steps, You're gonna feel really confident over the ball. You're gonna know that you can step up to any chip shot and knock it close. Let's go and get started. All right, so what's this shot that only works sometimes and can really hurt your other shots? And that is what I call the putt chip. And that's where the idea is that we're gonna use our putting stroke to hit this chip shot. There's a variety of ways that we have to do this, but this actually works really well if we do this really close to the green. So if I'm only, 20 or 30 feet from this hole, it can be really easy just to put the ball up there and be pretty consistent with it. So how does this work exactly? Well, number one, you want to take your putting stance. You want to make this feel like a putting stroke. So as I set up this golf ball, I'm going to take the width of my stance I would normally if I'm putting. The second piece here is that instead of having my normal grip and having the shaft kind of on an angle here, I'm going to raise this club up a little bit. So now the toe is down, the heel is a little bit up on the ground. And what this does is this takes this leading edge of this, or the flat part, the sole of the club, and it tilts it up this way. Now that's much less likely to grab in some of the grass. If only my toe is touching, it's going to kind of brush through the grass. It's going to have much less chance of getting stuck and digging, that kind of thing. So with those hands up, that helps it to glide through the turf a little bit easier. The third thing here, I want to use a fairly low lofted club. So I'm not using a sand wedge, a pitching wedge, anything like that. I'm really using like a 7-iron, 8-iron, 9-iron, somewhere around in there to get these little putt chips. And then finally, I'm really locking my legs. When you putt, one thing that all great putters have in common is they don't really move their lower body. So as I'm making this little chip putt, I'm not moving my knees at all. They stay perfectly still. You're locking in your hands and arms. You're kind of getting a little forward shaft lean, and you can kind of imagine all this being locked in. And all I'm doing as I go back and forth is that stays locked in. I rock it back and forth, and that's going to be just like a putting stroke, only we're chipping off the green. Now that can be really handy. These are actually pretty easy shots. It's not that tough when you're only 20 or 30 feet away, but there is some problems with this. So as you start to get a little farther from the green, you're not going to be able to hit them as close doing this. And here's the reason why. When I putt, if you think about even a pretty long putt, maybe I take my putter back to here. That would be a pretty long putt as I'm coming back and through. That's about all I feel comfortable with, keeping my knees still, keeping my body still, and still hitting this putt. Well, if I get rid of this 7-iron, and maybe I need to hit it over something, or I need the ball to check up a little bit faster, all of a sudden I switch to my sand wedge or lob wedge, and I do this same technique, the ball just isn't going to go very far. All right, so that bump and run shot, or that locked in putting stroke idea, works really good when I have to make a short stroke. So if I'm only taking it back a couple feet and taking it through a couple feet like I would be with a putter, I can stay really still with my lower body. I can stay locked in with my upper body. I can take a 7-iron, an 8-iron, a hybrid, just get the ball bumping up there, and it's really easy. But at some point, we get far enough away from the green, or we have trouble in the way. Imagine there's a bunker here in our way that we had to hit it over that bunker, to where that little short bump and run, locked in putting stroke style just isn't going to work. And if we try to have that same idea and have that locked in approach, that putting type approach, and we try to make that work when we're farther away, everything falls apart. So now if I'm farther away here and I have my sand wedge, let's imagine that there is a bunker or there is rough or something where I have to carry the ball on the green here, and now all of a sudden I'm trying to still keep my lower body still, I'm trying to lock everything up here at the top still. I just can't make that happen if I really use the technique the right way. The ball won't go far enough. So what you end up doing is you end up getting pretty jerky with the hands and wrists because you're trying to get more energy into it, and now all of a sudden we end up with this kind of mismatched, jerky, jabby type stroke that can easily shoot it over the green or be well short of the green. All right, so now let's jump in on what the pros are doing to free things up. Now here, the main difference, one style, the putting style, everything's locked in, we're trying to control. This style, we're loosening everything up. So if you pay attention to my knees, and what you'll see with all great chippers, they're gonna let these knees pivot. So I'm not trying to lock those in, I'm letting those flow as though I was gonna just toss a golf ball up on the green. So if I do this, watch my knees here first, and then we'll get into the details. So here, I'm gonna let everything turn on through, let my body create momentum, and now I can easily just chip a ball up there. It's not very tough at all. I'm letting my body create the momentum. So with this one, and one of the reasons that this is so much better with your hands and arms, and you don't feel like you're jabby, is I'm letting my body rotate. My hips are rotating, my chest is rotating, and that's creating the momentum. If I just hold this club very softly in my hands, now all of a sudden it's creating momentum that's gonna hit the ball. If I try to lock that in, I have to create that speed with my hands and arms, and things get a little crazy. So that's the first key there. In order to do that, I'm gonna set up with my heels almost touching. You'll see a lot of great chippers doing this. And I'm also gonna open my feet a little bit toward the target. That makes things easier for me to open up and pivot on through this shot. That's gonna allow me to use my body to create that momentum. I'm also, instead of locking my wrist in and keeping that really tight and rigid with my hands higher, I'm gonna go ahead and just let my hands hang freely and let my wrist stay really soft as I'm doing this. So as I'm going back and through, you can see my knees pivot, and everything else just kind of goes along for the ride. I get a little bit of wrist action, I get a little bit of wrist hinge, just completely fine. I'm not trying to lock it in and guide it. I'm letting the momentum of my body create that speed, create that momentum. So you can see there, it's really easy to hit these clean when you let your body do the work. So those are the main keys there. When we're hitting the putt type shot, that's completely fine if you're really close to the green and you can make this stroke that just goes back to here and back to here. At some point, that's not gonna be a big enough stroke. Or at some point, we're not gonna be able to roll the ball across the ground because there's a bunker in the way or there's rough in the way, and we're gonna have to make a bigger stroke. At that point, when you make that bigger stroke, instead of trying to lock things in, free things up. Ankles close together, feet open toward the target, my body creates the momentum, and my wrists stay nice and loose. Chipping can be extremely easy. I mean, if we can take a ball and toss it up toward this hole and get it pretty close to the hole consistently, then you can chip pretty well. I mean, it's really just not that hard. The hard thing, or we can make it as hard as we want to, if we follow a few pieces of advice that I think can lock us up to get us to be really tight. We'll start chunking, we'll start thinning, we'll start guiding it, we'll start trying to use our hands way too much in the chipping stroke, and really it's not gonna be very consistent. So let's make chipping easy. I'm gonna give you the real secrets, the real keys, so that you feel like you can just get up and down all the time. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's make chipping easy. Now you notice if I asked you to toss this golf ball to the hole, what you would do is you'd naturally start to take a step, you'd open up, you'd let your arm kind of have this free-flowing feel to it. You really wouldn't try to guide it. The last thing that you would do is kind of lock in all your angles, get everything perfectly straight, get your body to stop moving, only hinge from one angle, and then try to guide the ball up there. At least if you're gonna be any good, you wouldn't do that. If you try to do that, you'd probably end up, throwing the golf ball 10 feet in front of you or hitting yourself in the shoulder with it or something like that. So whenever we try to control things, we actually lose control. When you look at something very natural, like a tossing motion, you're gonna be free flowing. Again, those legs are gonna move, your body's gonna move. You're not trying to guide it up there. Same thing happens when you're chipping. When I'm chipping, what I wanna do here is I wanna get my knees to move. I want my knees to rock back and forth. That's gonna allow me to feel like I have a free flowing motion here and I can really chip very easily. The last thing I wanna do is to lock my knees in, keep everything very still, lock my arms in, and I'm liable when I do this, if I set up to a golf ball and try to lock everything in and go back and through, I'm liable just to chunk it and not have any feel at all. My hands are tight. I feel very anxious over the top of the golf ball when I'm trying to limit all my rotation. So if you imagine your right knee and your left knee, I want to have these pivot back and through, and that's going to make it a little bit more natural, a little bit more like a tossing motion, and you give up a little bit of control of your body, or you give up a little bit of trying to control your body, and you actually gain a lot of control while you're doing this. So you'll notice as I do these, I'm gonna let my hips, or my knees, my hips, my arms, my shoulders, all that kind of be free flowing, and then you'll see that that's naturally gonna get that ball to pop right up there. Almost made that one, but you're not gonna feel like you try to tighten this up. So that's the very first key there. Keep those knees moving, let those rock back and forth, and that's gonna help you to have a lot more feel and touch when you're hitting these chip shots. Piece number two is probably one of the most common things I see people get wrong, and that's trying to figure out where you're gonna hit the ground. In order to be a great chipper, we're gonna wanna hit the ground and the ball roughly at the same time. Now, I could try to place the ball. A lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, put the ball way back in your stance. Well, that's gonna cause some problems. If I put the ball way back in my stance, now in order to hit this golf ball, I'm gonna have to be hitting down into the ball. If I do that a little bit too much, now all of a sudden, I'm chopping down in the ground, very easy to chunk the golf ball. If I place the ball too far forward in my stance, well now it's gonna be tough for me to really flight that down and get some forward shaft lean. Here's a great way to just make it as easy as possible. I want you to go to set up to an imaginary golf ball here, close your eyes, and then swing back and forth 10, 15 times. So I'm gonna close my eyes here. I'm gonna start by not even hardly touching the ground at all, and then I'm gonna get to where I'm brushing the ground consistently in the same spot. So I really don't know where I'm hitting the ground at all right now. I'm just making my natural motion and seeing what's happened. Now when I open my eyes and look down, I can see there's a divot there. If I take this golf ball and I put that just right where the divot starts, or just in front of where the divot starts, so I can see the divot, the very first piece of grass that I'm roughing up is here, and then my divot comes up there. I'm gonna place that just in front of the first piece of grass that I touched. That way when my club comes down and touches the grass, that's gonna be right where I'm hitting the golf ball. So here, I haven't moved my stance, I haven't done anything different. I've just let my natural swing take over. Instead of trying to force something into your swing, just close your eyes, make some swings, figure out where you're hitting the ground, and then put the ball there. And that's gonna make it really easy to make ball first contact every single time. Again, hit a pretty good chip shot there, made some good contact. I'm just using my natural stroke. When you find out where that is, kind of notice where that is in relationship to your feet, and then go up to the next golf ball, pull it in, use the same placement in relationship to your feet, and then you're gonna go ahead, hit the next one, and you'll notice you're making a lot more ball first contact, a lot more clean contact when you do it this way. Now last piece is, I need to keep my eyes pretty centered to be able to hit this ball consistently. Now what's happening is if my eyes stay centered, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a little bit more weight on my left side. I'm gonna feel like my left hip is over my left ankle, my left shoulder is over my left ankle, my chest is a little forward, and now my eyes are just kind of on the inside of my left foot. Now as I rotate back and through, let those knees pivot, you'll notice how my eyes don't move around a lot. If I was to draw a line down from my eyes to the golf ball, I don't want that line to move. I don't want to go like this and come back and through. I don't want to lift up and see where the ball is going too early. That's going to make it really inconsistent when I'm hitting this golf ball. And the reason is my eyes are what's determining. You heard the idea of hand-to-eye coordination. If my eyes are really stable, I have them locked in on where I'm going to hit this golf ball. If my eyes start moving around, essentially what's happening is somebody's grabbing this golf ball and they're moving the golf ball around because I'm trying to figure out where I am in relationship to the golf ball. So I have to keep my eyes as stable as possible when I'm doing this. So imagine that I had a line coming up from the center of my left ankle. That's gonna go through the center of my hip and into my shoulder, kind of inside of my shoulder. I'm gonna let that rock back and through and stay stable on that line the entire way. I don't want that line to be moving around a lot or I'm gonna be inconsistent. Same thing with my eyes. I'm locked into the golf ball until I come through contact. I don't want my eyes moving around a lot. I'm gonna pivot back and through, but my eyes aren't gonna move. That's the only part that you wanna keep stable. The rest of it is free flowing and natural. You notice I can move my body here back and forth, but my eyes are locked in. They're not really moving around very much. Same thing you want to happen in your chipping stroke. That's going to make it a lot easier to make solid contact. Now we don't want to stop here. In this video we talked about the basics of getting some rhythm and getting some consistent contact, but we want to build on that and become a chipping master. That way we can just set up to a golf ball, chip it, and know it's going to get close to the hole. I've got a great bonus video to help build on what we talked about here today to help you master that chipping. All you need to do is click the card that pops up on your screen or the link down below in the description. You're going to be able to make that crisp, clean contact with the golf ball day in and day out. Let's go ahead and get started. Pitch shot could be anywhere from right by the green all the way back to probably 50 or 60 yards or so. And that's what you're going to want to do when you want to get a little bit more spin and get the ball a little bit more up in the air. We're going to go ahead and let the wrist set a little bit more, have a little bit more club action, get the ball to go a little higher in the air with a little bit more spin. So let me go ahead and describe what is a good pitch shot so that you know what you're really going for. I think we got to start from there, start from contact. So as I make contact, I want to be coming in very shallow to the ground. So I don't want to be taking much of a divot. I don't want to be hitting down into the ground. As the club releases and we have a flat spot where the club travels very level with the ground for 5 or 6 inches on these pitch shots. So when that happens, let me go ahead and exaggerate. As my hand is coming down, my hands are close to the ground. As this club gets closer and closer to the ground, my hands move up. As the club moves down, now you're seeing them having this flat spot.